Welcome to Front Office Pros. We are back live. We got Dustin Ludke back with us. He is soon to be in Kansas City for the first time being at the NFL draft. We're excited to hear from him after he comes back from the draft and all of the great stories that he'll be able to tell us. But for tonight, Joe and I have got competing mock drafts. So we're going to be It'll be a little bit different, but we're going to be going through each one of our mocks, and we're going to go 5 picks at a time. And then now Dustin's turn. If you didn't watch yesterday, the script is flipped. So before Dustin was going through his mock, and Joe and I were giving our reactions, and now I'm expecting Dustin to throw me some curveballs. So.
It won't be that bad, I promise. I'll be nice.
That's good. All right, so Joe, why don't you start us off? We're going through 1 through 5. So what do you got?
Yeah, I think everyone's got the same first pick in the draft on anyways with the Panthers. I got Bryce Young going there. And then, which might come to a surprise here, second pick, I've got the Texans taking Anthony Richardson. Now, I know that most people think they're going to go defense, but, I think they could just be throwing that out there. To me, I know DeMeco Ryans is a defensive guy, but they really need a quarterback to build around this team and to really improve it. And I think that being that they don't have like a win now roster, like Bryce Young or CJ Stroud really fits a win now, ready to play NFL team. Houston Texans just aren't quite there. So I think they can go with a guy like Anthony Richardson. Potentially could be boom or bust. But if he booms and really comes in maybe, and shines possibly in year 2, I think the Texans could really benefit from that. And then with the third pick, I've got a trade with the Titans trading up to the 3 spot with the Cardinals, and they take CJ Stroud. I think that it'd be tough for the Titans to sit here and watch their division rivals go quarterback and see all these guys come off the board and have to face them. So they trade up ahead of the Colts, get a guy in CJ Stroud, so they don't end up having to face them in the side of their division. With the Colts, I got them going Will Levis. I think they're definitely going to go quarterback. Guy Levis going here. We'll see if the rumors are true that they really like him or if they would prefer a guy like CJ Stroud instead. And then I've got Will Anderson going 5 to the Seahawks.
So on my end, and I will preface that as I'm going through this, a part of my rationale for my picks is I try to parse through what is true and what is lies, because we know there is a lot of smoke screens going on. We won't find out till after the draft happens what was truth and what was not. So we have to do our best job of trying to parse through that and figuring out what are these GMs actually thinking. So I'm agreeing with Joe. I think number 1 is Bryce Young. Very interesting within the past 24 hours. Vegas odds have been talking about possibly Will Levis going number 1 because of some Reddit guy saying he knows Levis and that Levis is telling his family he drafted 1. I'm not buying it. Maybe Vegas wants to make a little bit more money, but that is very interesting. Then for number 2, I got Will Anderson. I actually am buying what reports are saying that the Houston Texans really like Bryce Young. That's the guy they want. If Bryce Young falls to them, they'll take him. But if he's not there, I think they actually will go defense. Now, I could be wrong. I think I'm really torn between whether it's him or Tyree Wilson. The smart choice would be Will Anderson, but we know that the Texans like to make potential picks and are kind of shockers when it comes to who they take. They took Stingley ahead of Sauce Gardner last year. Most people had Sauce Gardner as the better corner. So for now, though, I'm going to go Will Anderson. Then I got a trade, and I've got just a swap between 3 and 4 with the Colts. I am really conflicted about whether or not the Colts actually want Will Levis or not. Reports are saying that they're enamored by Levis. They love Levis. That's the guy they want, and that could totally be possible. I'm not. I think it might be a smokescreen, though. I think they actually would rather have Stroud, and so they do a quick swap. So they go ahead and go to 3. I think they take Stroud, and then at 4, I've got the Cardinals staying put because I think they don't want to slide several picks down because I think they want still a blue chip player. And I think there are more NFL GMs that are really enamored by Tyree Wilson than most of us in like the fan and media realms. So they're going to go with Tyree Wilson. And then fifth, I got Jalen Carter going to the Seahawks. Part of the reason why I do trust certain media members more than others. I saw that Peter Schrager, I think, mentioned that Jalen Carter will not. It might have been him, but I think he said that he will not slide out of the top 6. I think that's very credible. And so to me, Jalen Carter makes a lot of sense for the Seahawks. Fills a position of need, but also could be regarded as the best prospect in this draft. And, when it comes to character issues, Pete Carroll is one to overlook those things. So, he notoriously has, I think he drafted Frank Clark. I'm trying to remember. He drafted some other people that had some character issues, but this is even close to what's done in the past. So, Dustin, what's your reaction to my mock and Joe's mock for the first 5 picks?
Yeah, honestly, it's fairly standard. So, Joe, my question with you is the trade with the Titans moving up to get Stroud. Is Will Levis then just the consolation pick? Or let's say the Titans don't trade up and Arizona stays there and they take Will Anderson. Would you still have the Colts taking Levis over Stroud, or would you have gone Stroud to the Colts if they were both available at 4?
Yeah, I think if both were available, I think I would give Stroud to the Colts. But Will Levis was just the way it fell to them. And and like you said, it essentially the consolation there.
All right. And then I think for you, Steve, it's like the Colts trading up one spot to get Stroud. Was that just did you think that's just like, hey, they feel like they need to so someone else doesn't jump in that spot? Because it seems like they could have stayed at 4 and gotten Stroud.
Yeah, I think the main reason is we've been hearing that Arizona is for sale. And I think of the picks in the top 10, they may be the most likely to trade out of that spot. So if it's actually false that they love Levis and that Stroud's actually their guy, then they're going to be very motivated to make that pick swap so that somebody like in Joe's mock doesn't come over top them, take Stroud, and then they end up with Levis.
That makes sense. I mean, overall, right, I think those are the guys that I think are in the conversation for the top 5. Richardson and Levis, I think, are on the cusp, but I think obviously Bryce Young's one, and we think that's all going to happen. I think Stroud's in there, Levis is in there, Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, Tyree Wilson, and Anthony Richardson are all possible for top 5. So nothing super shocking so far.
So, Steve, you mentioned Will Anderson being the right pick for the Texans. Why do you say that? Because I'm, even Peter Schrager, your reputable guy, is saying he's here and that, they'll go Tyree Wilson if they go defense at 2 here.
That's just my personal opinion as far as prospect evaluation goes. Tyree Wilson has never had over 10 sacks. He's playing for, I don't think this matters all that much, but he's not coming from a pedigree of a school. Texas Tech doesn't produce, defensive linemen, year after year. It's not known for that type of school. Like you got Iowa, who's got tight ends. You got Alabama, they've had numerous, defensive linemen. So I just, from a production standpoint, Will Anderson, what he's been able to do in the SEC is quite remarkable. So to me, that's why he's like the more obvious pick. I think Tyree Wilson's got traits. He's got the kind of maybe the more of the build that based on the potential, he can be, even better than guy Will Anderson. So Will Anderson is more safe. So that's why to me, I just think he's a better prospect. Same as I thought Sauce Gardner was a better prospect than Derek Stingley, but they ended up going with Stingley.
And I do think I saw something. I do think I saw something before we hopped on that Will Anderson saying that he talked to D'Amico Ryans and is really excited for the way that they could possibly use him. So that seems like things are kind of lining up a couple days out from the draft for that pick.
So heading over to the pick 6 through 10, Joe, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Peter Schrager did in fact say Jalen Carter wasn't going to fall outside the top 6. So I've got him going number 6 to the Detroit Lions. Then at 7, I've got the Las Vegas Raiders taking Peter Skoronski. They really need help along that offensive line. And I think they grab a solid at left tackle here and really bolster that offensive line with Skoronski. Then I've got Tyree Wilson going to the Atlanta Falcons. That defense just needs help. And, it's people might say it's interesting that he's, going to 8 here, but, they really need the talent there. And I think Tyree Wilson would make a big fit here with Atlanta. Then at 9, I've got the Bears taking Devin Witherspoon. They trade down in the draft and grab a good corner here that's good in man coverage. I think that'll really help their defense. And then to round things out, I've got the Eagles taking Bijan Robinson, replace Miles Sanders leaving and just bolster that offense even more.
So on my side for the 6 through 10, I got Christian Gonzalez going to the Detroit Lions. They just traded away Jeff Okudah. I know they signed Cameron Sutton, but they have a real need at the cornerback position. And Gonzalez is, one of the better prospects. I had heard Daniel Jeremiah is very confident that he does not see him sliding out of the top 10. I do think Daniel Jeremiah is pretty credible. So I'll have him going 6. Then they got Peter Skoronski going 7. I'm not buying that the Raiders are actually interested in a first-round quarterback. I think it's far more likely they may end up drafting a quarterback in the 2nd or 3rd round. I think that Josh McDaniels truly believes that he can win with Jimmy Garoppolo. So I'm not so sure that they actually are going to draft a first-round quarterback. So even though guys like Anthony Richardson and Will Levis, who still haven't been picked for me yet, I think they would pass on them and go with a guy like Peter Skoronski, who is, this kind of jack of all trades when it comes to an offensive line piece for them. Then I got Bijan Robinson going to the Falcons. I believe, I know you're going to not like this, Dustin, but I feel very strongly that Bijan Robinson is going to get drafted in the top 10. Saquon Barkley was drafted at the number 2 pick when he came out. And Bijan Robinson is as good of a prospect as Barkley, maybe if not better. Now, I know you've got the likes of people talking about like Isaiah Pacheco, who was drafted in the 7th round, that you don't need to draft a running back high, which in theory that is true, as far as like game planning and using running backs. However, I still think that NFL GMs have a soft spot for these type of elite type of running backs. So I would be very surprised if Bijan Robinson doesn't get drafted in the top 10. And interestingly enough, another guy I think who's kind of credible, after I had already solidified my mock draft, Peter King was talking about how the Falcons are really into Bijan Robinson, and he expects that they take Bijan Robinson. So I thought that was interesting after I had solidified my thoughts on Bijan Robinson going there, especially because, when you think about the head coach with Arthur Smith, it's a run-based offense. He's not going to be having Desmond Ridder throwing it around the yard. And I know they got Tyler Algier, but he's a 5th-round running back. Not a lot of draft capital there. He could easily be supplanted. Then for number 9, I got Devin Witherspoon, same as Joe. And, for me, when it comes to him, I think it makes a lot of sense. They don't really have any good corners. Jalen Johnson, former draft pick of theirs, really hasn't done much. So I think it makes a lot of sense for him to stay in the state of Illinois. And in my last pick, number 10, I've got the Seahawks trading from 20 to go up to 10 to take Anthony Richardson. And I'm believing the hype that the Seahawks are very intrigued by Anthony Richardson and they want him. I think they passed him up at 5, but they want to get to this 10 spot because it leapfrogs the Tennessee Titans. So I also think the Titans could be in play. So that's why they're trading from 20 to 10. And for the Eagles, I think for them, the picks that they might have wanted to take at this point are now all gone. Tyree Wilson's gone. Will Anderson is gone. Jalen Carter is gone. And in my mock, Bijan Robinson is gone. So I think all the guys they would have targeted at the spot are gone. So it makes sense for them to trade back and get some extra picks. But Dustin, what is your thoughts?
Yeah, so we'll start with Joe. Bijan to the Eagles at 10 is a hyped up pick, right? That's the big thing that everybody wants right now. Do you think that might be a little too early for what he would be for the Eagles offense? They signed Rashad Penny. They have Kenny Gainwell, Boston Scott. Do you think that that's a huge need for them versus, say, corner, safety, defensive ends at 10. It seems like it's an awfully high cost to get a running back who will be sharing that backfield on some level, just like Miles Sanders did.
Yeah, but he's going to lead the backfield. You mentioned Rashad Penny. That guy can't stay on the field. I'm not a believer in him at all. And then, Kenneth Gainwell, he's a nice piece as a change of pace guy, and the receiving back sure could have a third down role, but they need an every down guy, and I think that's exactly what Bijan Robinson would bring. I think that's what they're trying to get with that trade with Penny, but I just don't believe that guy's going to actually stay on the field and be a producer for them.
No, I agree with that. And so, Steve, I'm going to need you to lay back and pretend you're in a doctor's office and tell me when did Tyler Algier hurt you? Why do you hate him so much? There's no way the Falcons need Bijan Robinson or take Bijan Robinson. Tyler Algier, yes, he was a 5th round pick, but he produced really well last year. I don't think draft capital matters when you produce. So how did Tyler Algier hurt you, and why do you hate him so much, Steve?
When Bijan Robinson gets drafted at 8, you're going to text me and say, I hate you, because you have Tyler Algier on your fantasy teams, especially on your dynasty teams.
Yes.
And you're very biased that you don't want the Falcons to take your running back so that you can continue to ride the wave of Tyler Algier.
That is true. And I'm curious why you have the Seahawks trading up to 10. Why wouldn't they just take Richardson at 5 if they really want a quarterback? Is it just they want to jump ahead of Tennessee? Seems like an awful big jump from 20 to 10 when they could have just got the guy at 5.
Well, because then they leave the draft with Jalen Carter and Anthony Richardson. I mean, to me, coming away with both of those players, which, Richardson probably the biggest ceiling potential boom bust player in this draft class. And then you've got a guy who like Jalen Carter, who might have the most pure talent at the position. So, they have the 2 first-round picks. How are they going to maximize it? So to me, if they have to give, their, earlier 2nd-round pick or, even possibly a first next year, if they think that Richardson is the type of quarterback that can help them move forward, I don't see why they would blink an eye at going up to be able to leave the draft with Carter and Richardson would be huge.
Yeah. Overall,
because Carter's not going to be at 10. Carter won't be there at 10.
Carter won't be there at 10. I agree with that. I mean, overall, I think these are all the guys other than Robinson, who I don't have as a top 10 pick. I think he's top 10 talent, but I don't think the position warrants that. But overall, so far, so good with you guys so far. We'll see how it goes from here on out.
So going over to 11 to 15, Joe, start us off.
All right, yeah. So starting off with the Cardinals, as they, traded down from 3 to 11 here, I got them going with Nolan Smith. They really need some help on the defensive line after losing J.J. Watt and Zach Allen in free agency here. So Nolan Smith will definitely help the defensive line and get to the quarterback here. And I got the Texans at 12 going with Jackson Smith and Jigba. They really bolstering the offense with a quarterback at 2, and then getting the best wide receiver in this draft, just a pure route runner that can get open, and they could really use that. And then I got the Packers at 13 now after the trade with Rodgers yesterday, and I got them taking Lucas Van Ness, defensive end out of Iowa, just to get help along the defensive line. Rashad Gary got hurt last year. Give him a player opposite as well. And then I've got the Patriots going offensive line, taking Broderick Jones out of Georgia. You might say they got Smith and they signed Riley Reef in free agency. Why do they really need to go offensive line? Well, I think it's a good investment for them to protect Mac Jones. Those guys are, in their 30s. They're older. I think this will give them a long-term replacement and really help in that. And then to round out this round here, I got Jets taking Paris Johnson, offensive tackle out of Ohio State. This guy is just a big dude and mauler, and they really need offensive line help to now protect Aaron Rodgers. Becton just can't stay healthy, so I think this is a good pick for them.
So on my side, I got the Tennessee Titans taking Jackson Smith and Jigba. They drafted Treylon Burks in the first round last year, but after that, they really have nobody in their receiver core. They let Robert Woods go out the door, so he's with their division rival with the Texans. They've got Nick Westbrook-Akeen, but that's not enough for them. And Jackson Smith and Jigba fits a need, and I think he's going to be the first receiver off the board, so it makes a ton of sense for them to take him. Then I got the Texans taking Will Levis. I think for me, the question will be, will Levis still be here? But I think that I actually considered moving Levis and or Richardson down even further. I know, Joe, conversely to you, you've got them going 1, 2, 3, 4. That's never happened before. I think one of these guys could have an Aaron Rodgers type slide. So it'll be interesting. But I stopped the slide at 12. I think even Peter Schrager might have said that he sees all 4 quarterbacks being taken within the top 12. So this is where I stopped it. And I think that's a part of why the Texans are going to take a defensive player at 2, because they feel confident that there isn't really much of a difference between Stroud, Levis, and Richardson. Then for 13, I got Michael Mayer, tight end out of Notre Dame. Now that it's going to be the Jordan Love show in Green Bay, I think, he's not a rookie per se, right? But he hasn't had a lot of playing time. So bringing in a guy like Mayer, I think could really help him in his development to have a big target like that in the middle of the field. So I think that makes a ton of sense for them. Then for 14, I've got the Patriots taking Lucas Van Ness. He just seems like a Patriots player. I don't know. It just seems to make too much sense for me to have him go there. Matt Judon is not getting any younger. I know they've got Josh Uche on the other side who has shown flashes. But, he hasn't been too consistent. So I think bringing in a guy like him could really help in their rotation. And lastly, I got Broderick Jones going to the Jets. Mekhi Becton has been an absolute bust. And they just need more reliance on the offensive line. Even with Aaron Rodgers coming over, if they can't protect him, it's a moot point. So Dustin, what are your thoughts on 11 through 15 for us?
Yeah, Steve, with yours, it's interesting that you had Seattle jump up to 10 to get Anthony Richardson and then had Tennessee pass on a quarterback. So are you thinking that Tennessee just doesn't like Will Levis, or they're just content with Ryan Tannehill, Malik Willis, or what were your thoughts with that exchange of 10, 11, 12 picks?
Well, I am believing that they are out on Malik Willis. I think if you just looked at the press conferences with Mike Vrabel after the games he started, he just looked completely disgusted. So I think they're moving on from him. I actually think at this point the Titans might rather trade for Trey Lance. I know it's kind of a bold take, but Rand Carthon was from the San Francisco organization, now the new GM for the Tennessee Titans, and there's been talks about possibly the Niners trading away Trey Lance. So I could see them possibly targeting him. But yeah, I think Levis. I just believe that they're going to pass on Levis and they'd rather have Richardson.
To that point, though, wouldn't it have made more sense to just have Seattle trade with the Titans at 11 if they weren't going to take a quarterback and they just trade down? And then it'd only be 9 spots instead of 10 instead of the Seahawks trading with the Eagles?
That's possible, too. I mean, that definitely could happen. If they are passing on quarterback, they might be able to get a first rounder next year. And then you've got guys like Caleb Williams and Drake May coming out, and then they can draft their quarterback there. So could definitely see that happening. I just, felt that made more sense with the Eagles.
Yeah. And then, Joe, I was wondering, what were your thoughts on Broderick Jones over Paris Johnson? So you have Broderick Jones at 14, Paris Johnson at 15. What made you like Broderick Jones more than Paris Johnson there?
Yeah, I just I think most people, and including myself, I think he's the higher rated guy, higher rated offensive lineman, playing along with Georgia. And so just had him going 1 pick ahead there to the Patriots over Paris Johnson. I think, they're pretty close talent wise. I think you could kind of flip flop them, but being the higher guy on the board, I just made him come off the board first with the Patriots there.
That's fair.
So heading over to 16 to 20, Joe, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, so at 16, I got the Commanders going Christian Gonzalez. Many people think he's the top corner in this draft here, so I got him going 16 to the Commanders. Then Joey Porter Jr. goes to the Pittsburgh Steelers and plays for a team that his dad played for and was on the coaching staff. And I think this guy just fits perfectly for what the Steelers want to do with the tight man coverage. He's just an aggressive corner. I think that match just makes too much sense. And then I've got the Lions with their second pick going Miles Murphy, defensive end out of Clemson. Get to play alongside Aiden Hutchinson. And, man, in this draft, just being able to improve that defensive line with Jalen Carter in my mock and then Miles Murphy, that's quite the defensive line they're putting together. Then I got the Bucks going Darnell Wright, offensive tackle out of Tennessee. Their offensive line is in shambles, really needs an upgrade. And I think they'd be ecstatic if Darnell Wright falls to them at 19 here. And I think that's a good spot for him. Then at 20, like you were saying, Steve, Seahawks going quarterback in the first round. I just got them getting Hendon Hooker out of Tennessee here at 20. If it wasn't for the ACL injury, this guy could easily be one of those top 5 quarterbacks in the draft, going into top 5 in the NFL draft. But he's recovering from the ACL injury, and I don't think Geno Smith isn't the long-term answer for the Seahawks, so they get Hendon Hooker here and build the future there.
So on my end at pick 16, I got the Commanders taking Dalton Kincaid. It brings them a new dimension for that receiving group. Logan Thomas is a makeshift tight end, has been able to stay healthy. And when I watch this guy, his ability with separation reminds me of a Travis Kelce. I'm not saying he's Travis Kelce. I'm just saying the way he separates and gets open. I think, having Eric Bieniemy there, I think having Kincaid in that offense will really help Sam Howell. And at this point, all the main quarterbacks have been taken. So I think they take best player available, and I think Kincaid would be great for them. Then they got Joey Porter Jr. going to the Steelers. I feel like the Steelers are a team that more than likely projects what they're doing. Like, it seems kind of obvious what they're doing. Like a few years ago, like it seemed like pretty much like a slam dunk that they were going to take Najee Harris. I kind of feel similar about this Joey Porter Jr. pick. It fits a need for them because their secondary has been absolutely horrible for quite some time. They haven't had a good corner since Joe Hayden, ended up getting, older and ended up not being on the team anymore. So I think Joey Porter Jr. makes so much sense, based on the, the roots of his dad playing there and everything else. Then they got the Bills trading up to 18. I know, Dustin, you're not going to like this, especially from what we talked about yesterday. And for those who are watching, put your comments below if you agree or disagree with me or agree with Dustin, I should say. But when it comes to Zay Flowers, I'm believing the reports that Zay Flowers won't get out of the top 20. And I think there are a lot of teams that are interested in Zay Flowers. And I think the Bills have been a team I don't think they're going to stay. I think they're going to trade up or they may trade back. I listened to a recent press conference from Brandon Beane, and a part of me believes that Zay Flowers is a player that they could covet in the slot, and if they're going to want him, they're going to have to trade up. So I went ahead and said they're going to trade up and get Zay Flowers. Then I got the Bucks taking Paris Johnson. Have no complaint with you taking Darnell Wright either, Joe. I think offensive tackle is the way to go. Donovan Smith, who was their left tackle, had so many holding penalties, and they ended up just flat out releasing him. So there is a huge void at that tackle spot for them. So to me, it makes a ton of sense for them to take a tackle. And then the Eagles, with that trade with the Seahawks, I have them taking Nolan Smith. A lot of people compare him to the likes of Hassan Reddick, and Hassan Reddick has been able to, have the best years of his career in Philadelphia. When it comes to their pass rush, you got guys like Brandon Graham who are getting older. Josh Sweat is good, I don't think great. And then you got Hassan Reddick. So, Howie Roseman loves to invest in the defensive line. So I think Nolan Smith here just makes too much sense. So, Dustin, what are your thoughts for this group of guys?
All right, well, we'll start with Joe, the easy one. So I love the Hendon Hooker to Seattle pick, but do you think this is too much of a future play since Hendon Hooker's probably not playing this year at all? Geno Smith's still there. Do you think that the Seahawks could go more impact now player, like a defensive guy or offensive tackle to help them win this year? Because they have a good shot at winning that division, at least making the playoffs with Geno Smith and possibly getting Hooker in the second round or getting a guy later. What are your thoughts on balancing future in Hendon Hooker versus win now in the draft?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. But at pick 5, I had him getting Will Anderson, so that definitely helps him this year. And then, in my mock here, a lot of the offensive tackles are gone. So I just think the best value, Hendon Hooker. I know it's more of a future play, but I don't think Hendon Hooker is going to get out of the first round, and I don't think they'd be able to get him in the second round. I think a team would trade up into the late first and grab him. So, just how the board fell, I think that they'd be willing to risk the future or risk the, win now with some of the pieces still left on the board for a good future play in Hendon Hooker here.
That makes sense. Steve. We talked about this last night. I don't think Zay Flowers is the type of receiver the Bills need. I don't think they need a slot guy. But also you have them trading up to get him. So they're giving up future capital. They probably have to give up at least a second, if not a first next year, to move up to 18 to get Zay Flowers. To me, that seems like an overreaction to the Bills not having a true number 2 wide receiver and Gabe Davis not being what we thought he was going to be. It just seems like a big reach for me. So what were your thoughts there? You think it's just do you see that much of a gap between Zay Flowers and guys like Quentin Johnson, Jordan Addison, Josh Downs, and that's why they need to move up and get him, and there's just that much of a gap? Or was it just, I really want the Bills to have Zay Flowers?
I mean, I am a big Zay Flowers fan, so I mean that might influence a little bit of my decisioning. But where I disagree with you is I think if the reports are true that they would be considering taking Josh Downs at their 27th pick, then that tells me they are looking for that type of receiver. So to me, I think they are. I mean, that I think Joe brought up a great point even last night. That's why they keep bringing back Cole Beasley because they need that type of player who's got that short area quickness, to be able to create that separation in the slot. And I think Zay Flowers. The only thing is, and hear me here, I think Zay Flowers, and from what I've heard from, and I don't know who said this, but they thought that watching his tape, he resembled like a Steve Smith type of player.
Yeah.
And that is, very familiar to Sean McDermott and Brandon B because they both were raised up in that Carolina organization. So to me, I think they've already seen the quickness and toughness of a guy like Zay Flowers. So I don't think they're going to be concerned by that 5'9" frame. And if it does give them flashbacks to a guy like Steve Smith, I could definitely see them wanting a guy like Zay Flowers.
Okay, makes sense.
It's interesting, especially considering they could possibly just take a second-round pick and get DeAndre Hopkins over from the Cardinals.
Yeah.
It's true, and they might, and the question is the cap space, right? I mean, they don't, I think that Cardinals are having a lot harder time trading DeAndre Hopkins. I'm questioning whether they'll get anything for him. They may just have to outright cut him because of the amount of cap space that teams would have to absorb to be able to acquire him. I would think that he would have been traded by now. He's been out in the trade market now ever since Jonathan Gannon really became the head coach. So we're talking about months. Whereas guys like Marquise Hollywood Brown and A.J. Brown, who were traded during the draft last year, like those were shockers. Like we had no clue that these guys were going to get traded. Like that was very sudden. Like maybe A.J. Brown a little bit because, he wanted to get paid and they were having a contract dispute. So that one made a little bit more sense, but you thought, okay, they'll find a way to figure it out. But like Hollywood Brown, I don't know. To me, both of those were shockers.
Yeah, I agree. Would you
agree? That. Would you agree, Joe?
Yeah, they definitely were. Like you said, AJ Brown had the disgruntled and didn't really get anywhere with the contract talks, but still was very interesting to see him and surprising to go to the Eagles during the draft last year.
Yeah.
So heading over to 21 to 25, Joe, take it away.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, with you had Kincaid going to the Commanders, I mean, this guy's a playmaker at tight end, and I think Kellen Moore would love to have this guy in his offense with the Chargers, with the dynamic receivers they have, and him being able to patrol the middle of that field there. I think he'd be an exciting pick for the Chargers. Then I got the Baltimore Ravens, getting a bigger body receiver with Quentin Johnson from TCU, who I believe is the second best receiver at after Jackson Smith and Jigba, play alongside Odell Beckham Jr. and kind of take some of the pressure off of Bateman there and keeping Lamar Jackson happy. Then I've got Minnesota going with cornerback Deontay Banks out of Maryland. This is a secondary that's just been awful, really needs a lot of help, and I think Banks is an interesting corner that can definitely help him out. And then, similar goals for the Jacksonville Jaguars at 24. Got him taking Brian Branch, safety out of Alabama. Another team that's the secondary really slowed them down, in the defense, especially their playoff run, with just how dynamic their offense has been, and the offense is on the rise. Defense needs to kind of catch up and match that, so they got a chance to take a playoff run. And I think a Swiss Army knife player like Brian Branch makes a lot of sense for him. And then at 25, I got the Giants going. Jordan Addison. I know you didn't have him in the first round, Dustin, in your mock draft, but got the Giants going, taking him here, and team that really just needs more off of our offensive weapons. They just keep bringing back the same guys they had last year. Don't think they're going to do that. They definitely got to adjust the position, and I think Jordan Addison definitely helps that offense.
So on my side, I also have Jordan Addison, but he's going to the Chargers. I really struggled with this pick. I didn't really want to put Jordan Addison there. I know a lot of people have mocked the receiver to the Chargers, and I kind of disagree with it. But at the same time, Keenan Allen is getting older. They almost had possibly thought about cutting him this offseason. So I think he may have one more year left with the Chargers. And then you've got Mike Williams, who hasn't been able to stay healthy. And you got Joshua Palmer. So maybe it's the rich getting richer, just trying to continue to, bolster up their, receiver core for Justin Herbert. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. I would think that they should go a different direction, but there is a part of me that thinks that, they may end up going this route with Addison. Then at 22, I also have Quentin Johnston going to the Baltimore Ravens. Similar to Joe's logic, I think it makes a ton of sense. Lamar really hasn't had a lot of options to really work with. Now he would have Rashad Bateman, Quentin Johnston, and also Odell Beckham with J.K. Dobbins and Mark Andrews. That's a pretty high-powered offense. With Todd Monken being in there as offensive coordinator, I think they're definitely going to change things around based on what Greg Roman used to do with the offense. Then at 23, I got Hendon Hooker going to the Vikings. I think Hendon Hooker – actually, I believe very strongly that Hendon Hooker is going to get drafted in the first round. I just am trying to figure out where and how high. I think I saw him – Peter Schrager's mock draft, I think he went 12 to the Texans. I think I'd fall all over in my chair if that happened. But I think the Vikings make too much sense. They already have Kirk Cousins there. A guy like Kevin O'Connell, who was a former quarterback himself, could really help him because that offense at Tennessee had really simple read concepts, very easy for a quarterback to play in that type of offense, almost like an air raid style offense. So I think Hendon Hooker going there makes a lot of sense. Not only can he learn the playbook, but he also could take a year, to recover from that ACL, and then they can move off from Kirk Cousins. Then at 24, I've got Deontay Banks going to the Jaguars, and this makes a ton of sense. They moved away from Shaquille Griffin. They really only have Tyson Campbell as their cornerback, so bringing in Banks helps them fill a need, and he's definitely a guy who, Joe, you were even telling me has just been rising up the board, so it felt like it made a lot of sense for him to go here. And then lastly, the Giants, I got them taking Jalen Hyatt, the wide receiver out of Tennessee. Giants, to me, are definitely going wide receiver in the first round. In the way that the draft has fallen, as far as my perspective, you already have got Quentin Johnston, Addison, Flowers, and Jackson Smith and Jigba all gone. And I heard recently this morning that Tom Pelissero says that he thinks there's going to be at least 4 receivers taken, if not more. So the question will be, will it be Hyatt? That's the thing where I've really kind of debated. He's got that speed. Or I guess it really didn't show in his 40-yard time, but he can, based on his game tape, he's really been able to blow the top off of defense, which a lot of teams covet. I don't know. They may go off the board, though. They may go for a guy like Mingo out of Ole Miss. He's been kind of rising up the boards. Maybe they go for a guy like Josh Downs. They may go at a different. It might not be Hyatt, but I definitely think they're going to end up going receiver at 25. But Dustin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'll start off, Steve. I love Hendon Hooker to Tennessee. It's the place I've been saying most of the offseason. I think he should go. He can sit behind Kirk Cousins. I mean, Hendon Hooker to Minnesota. Yes, from Tennessee. I think that just makes sense that he can learn that offense and sit behind a year. Interesting that neither of you guys have Chargers or Minnesota getting a running back with them. Talk about possibly, Minnesota getting rid of Dalvin Cook, the Chargers possibly getting rid of Austin Eckler, maybe a Jahmyr Gibbs could be in play there. And then I have questions for both of you about your wide receiver choice to the Giants. So last night I had the Giants taking Quentin Johnston because they need a big receiver. All their guys are under 6 foot. I think Darius Slayton 6'1", Isaiah Hodgins is 6'3", but the rest of them are like 6 foot, 5'9". And you got both Hyatt and Addison are 6 foot. So it just doesn't seem like the type of receiver they need, especially Hyatt, who's a speed guy, and that's not really Daniel Jones' game. Is he's not really a chucking the ball down the field type guy. So I'm curious why you guys think they'll go with those type of receivers versus maybe waiting and getting, if they can't get a Quentin Johnson, maybe waiting till second or third round to get a taller guy. Do you think another 6 foot smaller guy is what they need on the Giants? So Joe, we'll start with you. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, more than just, the need for a tall receiver, Dustin, they just need somebody who's going to get open. And I think that's exactly what, a guy like Jordan Addison would bring. Now, my mock Quentin Johnson didn't make it to him, but if Johnson's on the board, I'm sure they would take him. But with Johnson going to the Ravens, I feel like Jordan Addison was the next best guy for the Giants to take. And, I understand their need for a potential big guy, but they just need some playmakers. And I think Jordan Addison checks that box and gets it done for him.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you think?
I agree with Joe. I think I understand what you're saying with hype, but they did bring in a big target in Darren Waller. And I think and could they go for a guy like Mingo, or could they go for like a guy like Cedric Tillman? I think that's a little rich if they went that route. That's why I ended up going Hyatt, because he brings that element of blowing the top off a defense that a lot of teams covet. If Quentin Johnson's there, though, I agree with Joe. I think they would take him.
Okay, makes sense.
All right, head over to 26 through 30. Joe, start us off.
Yeah, to start, I got the Cowboys taking Michael Mayer, tight end at Notre Dame. Here's a guy that can block as well as be a pass catcher. They lost Dalton Schultz in free agency. I know this potentially kills Dustin because he likes some of the guys like Ferguson, who's got potentially the role right now.
Peyton Hendershot, baby.
Peyton Hendershot as well. But, I think this really fills the role for them with losing Schultz and Michael Mayer being able to block. Mike McCarthy did come out and say they were going to run the ball more. We'll see if it actually happens, but Michael Mayer would also help out in the run game as well. And then at 27, this was a tough pick for me. I don't know exactly what direction the Bills are going to go with, but you can always need help on the offensive line in depth. So got them taken inside offensive lineman Osiris Torrance out of Florida. I feel like the Bills have kind of used free agency to fill the guard role lately. And this, gives them a chance to draft and possibly develop one so they don't have to continue to do that. And then at 28, given everything with Joe Mixon, his legal trouble, rumors out there that the Bengals could potentially move on from him. I've got them taking Jahmyr Gibbs. Here's a guy that's talks are rising on him. People are saying that the gap is closing between him and Bijan Robinson a little bit. So I think he could easily go in the first round here. So I slot him with the Bengals. And then at 29, I've got the Saints taking Khalija Kancey, defensive tackle. I think, they lose Onyemata in the free agency. And I think help along the defensive line makes a lot of sense with this pick. And then at 30, I got the Eagles going with Brian Brzee. Also, just adding some depth there along the defensive line. I know they got Davis, but they lose Hargrave in free agency. So this helps kind of fill that need there.
Yeah, so on my side, I got the Dallas Cowboys taking Myles Murphy. Right now they got DeMarcus Lawrence, but he's not getting any younger. They brought back Dante Fowler, but he's been somewhat of a disappointment, more of a role player. I know they drafted Sam Williams in the second round last year, but he's still more of a developmental player. Murphy he can pass rush inside, outside. I think a guy like Dan Quinn would really like having a guy like Murphy there. And having him and the likes of Micah Parsons, that'd be an exciting tandem for them. Then I got the Lions taking Osiris Torrance. I really struggled with this pick with the Lions. It is interesting. I never understood why teams were talking about, or sorry, not teams, but there were different analysts talking about that the Lions were going to be a hot spot for a running back. Because I'm like, well, they just signed David Montgomery and they also have DeAndre Swift. Why would they do that? But there have been more discussion about how they may trade DeAndre Swift during the draft, which would be I'm not that surprised because I don't think they haven't really given very many glowing remarks about him. So I wouldn't be surprised. So maybe even a guy like Gibbs ends up going to 27. But I went with Osiris Torrance because because continue to build in that interior offensive line, help Jared Goff and that offense continue to sustain what they did over the last year. Then I got the Bengals taking Jahmyr Gibbs, similar to Joe here. I'm really concerned about Joe Mixon. I think all the indications they're going to be moving on from him with all the legal issues and even just some of the higher ups in Cincinnati coming out and kind of being very non-committal about him. If he doesn't take a pay cut, then he's on the move. So I think he's going to be gone. I actually was not going to have Gibbs in the first round mock, but again, guy I keep referencing here, but Peter Traeger said that he definitely sees Gibbs definitely going in the first round. So all right, I'm going to believe him. So I thought this made the most sense to put him here. But I got Kalijah Kancey also going to the Saints, and similar logic, Joe. David Onyemata is gone. They have nobody in that interior defensive line, absolutely nobody. They can't just rely on Cameron Jordan, who is getting up in age to provide pass rush for them. So this is a need spot for them, but also great value getting Kancey. And lastly, I got Brian Branch going to the Eagles. So I think this is a really nice fit for the player and the team. They lost C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Marcus Epps in free agency, so both safeties are gone. You bring in a guy like Branch, who has had great production in Alabama. I think it's a great fit for him going to the Eagles. Dustin, thoughts on Joe and I's picks for 26 or 30?
Yeah, I think it all makes sense. I like the Jahmyr Gibbs to the Bengals. So question for both of you is, where do you think Joe Mixon goes? Do you think he's cut? Do you think he gets picked up? Do you think he's just takes a year off? Steve, where do you think Joe Mixon could wind up if he's not on the Bengals?
Yeah, I know Joe and I have talked about this in private quite a bit of our own opinions. I'm trying to remember where you stand on this, Joe. But for me, I think he might be done. I think once he gets cut, I don't think a team is going to want to pick up that baggage with everything going on with him. He started, if you look at his efficiency numbers, he started to slow down. He's definitely not a locker room guy, so it's going to have to be a specific team. And this draft class is so deep when it comes to the running back position. It's really reminiscent, I believe, to that 2017 class, I think it was, with Fournette and McCaffrey and Aaron Jones and Joe Mixon himself. So to me, I think he could be done, but that might be an overreaction on my part.
Yeah, so where do you think he goes?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure if I don't really have an exact landing spot for him, but I don't agree with Steve that he's going to be done. I think there's always a spot for a veteran running back, even if it's a practice squad or teams after the draft. Once they look at their teams, they're always adding veteran running backs in training camp and just adding that camp back and kind of helping out the younger guys. So I don't have an exact spot for him, but I do think he goes somewhere.
If I could push back on that, you still got guys like Leonard Fournette and Ezekiel Elliott who are out there, and then possibly even talking about Dalvin Cook being out there. So if all these running backs get drafted, right, who end up going to these teams, what running back need teams are going to bring in a guy like Joe Mixon?
Yeah, I could see a team like Miami bringing Mixon in as like a veteran presence just to kind of be there at that kind of name and kind of push those guys. I agree with Joe. I don't think he's done. I do think he picks on somewhere, but he has a limited role wherever he goes. But I can't see him being done. I agree with you that his efficiency numbers have dropped. And with guys like Zeke Elliott and Fournette and possibly Dalvin Cook out there, I think if you have those 4 guys, I think Mixon might be at the top of that class just based on what he's done and the low number of carries he has on him. I don't know for sure, but he's probably up there. You're probably lower on that count than Zeke and Fournette. But I think he still catches on with the team, especially coming off a winning team like the Bengals, who have done pretty well the past 2 seasons. I think he can come in and be a veteran presence on a team, who has got a younger running back. So I don't think he's done, but I think his time in Cincinnati is limited.
So heading over to 31, Joe, finish us off here.
Yeah, so at 31, I've got the Chiefs going defensive end with Felix Anudike-Uzomah out of Kansas State. I think defensive end makes a lot of sense for them. They lose Frank Clark here and gives them somebody to go alongside their first-round pick last year at defensive end. So I think this will really help out the pass rush for the Chiefs, and they could honestly go a lot of different directions. They're Super Bowl champs. Don't have too many needs, but this was the one need I think they could fill here.
Yeah, for me, I took Will McDonald, the 4th defensive end, Iowa State. Similar logic to you, Joe. They lost Frank Clark. Are going to want to replace that production. I could see them taking Felix as well. I just felt like McDonald might be the better prospect, so they end up going there. Miami obviously forfeited their pick. And then for my mock draft, the guys who didn't make the cut, who were in strong consideration but didn't make it, were Darnell Wright, offensive tackle out of Tennessee, Brian Broussais, defensive tackle out of Clemson, and then Emmanuel Forbes, cornerback, Mississippi State. For Joe, Zay Flowers did not go in the first round, and then also Will McDonald didn't make the first round, and then similar to me, Emmanuel Forbes didn't make the first round. So, Dustin, what are your thoughts there?
So my thoughts are, I think you guys are the 2 sides of a coin. Steve, I think you overall, I liked Steve. I liked your first half of the draft. Joe, I liked your second half of the draft. Joe, do you feel like you went too much anti-fantasy, and whereas I think Steve, maybe you went too much fantasy with too many wide receivers and tight ends and not enough offensive tackles, and you both are IDP players, so you have a lot more defensive players. So, Steve, you not having Darnell Wright in offensive tackle, I think that's a need that a lot of teams have. And Joe, I think maybe you after your really QB heavy top of the draft kind of turned the knob a little too far and went maybe a little too far out by not having Zay Flowers. So you guys think do you both think that the fantasy aspect that we are in and dealing with fantasy football, whether that's dynasty, redraft, IDP, played in your draft one way or the other? So we'll start with you, Joe. What do you think about that concept of that analysis lens playing into your mock draft?
Yeah, I really tried to not think of it from a fantasy perspective, honestly. I was strictly just thinking, kind of from a football lens and, what are some teams' needs and trying to slot guys the best I can. Now, I know it's probably, it's not a very popular pick for the quarterbacks to go with the first 4 picks in the draft, but hey, those teams definitely could use them and go that route. But yeah, I really tried to not have the fantasy really play a part, because honestly, if it did, I don't know if the Eagles are the best spot for Bijan Robinson to go for a dynasty or fantasy, but for the Eagles, I think that would make sense for them.
Yeah, I feel similar, Joe. I think when I was making my picks, I really wasn't thinking about it from a fantasy lens. I was thinking about it more from what is the news I'm hearing? Is it fact or fiction based on what we're hearing about all the rumblings? And then just really looking at team needs and best player available, what players made sense and making those moves. A part of the reason why I didn't have more offensive linemen in there is because my understanding is this class is not a strong class when it comes to offensive linemen. I think one of the things that, if we were to review my mock draft after the fact, one thing that I could probably say I should have done, there are some, and I don't know all of them off the top of my head. You may know them, Dustin, but there's some other interior offensive linemen that I didn't include. I think like Tuppen, I think, might be one of them, and then Avizia or something like that.
Yeah, Joe Tippmann, Steve Avalia, or whatever his name is, Avalia. Yeah, they're 2 interior offensive guys that are, I think, in consideration there.
Yeah, so I could definitely see those guys getting taken in the later half, because what ends up happening is, there's so many teams that have first round grades on players, but they all have different first round grades. So that's why usually the first half of a draft is, I think, usually pretty standard. You're not going to see any like true shockers. Maybe one like, oh, I'm surprised by that pick. But then when you get to the 16 to 32 range, then you're talking that second half. Now you're talking about some picks that are like, whoa, like where did that come from? Like when the Patriots took Cole Strange, it was kind of like, what just happened there? So that's where you've got these teams. We follow the mock draft cycles and the PFFs of the world and the NFL networks and whatever, right? So we follow what all these different media people are saying and who they think is good picks. But then these NFL teams, they have a whole different philosophy of who they like, and that's where I think I probably should have put some of those players in there that ended up not being in there. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be an interesting end of the week this week in Kansas City. We'll see how these guys fare. And realistically, for me, once you get past pick 25, that's basically a second rounder. Like, yes, it's a first round, but the difference between 31 and 32 is really just the round difference. The player difference is, minimal for me. I like I said, when I did my mock draft, I had 25 guys with first round grades that weren't even first round grades. Like, these guys I think are going in the first round. And there's, probably 15, 20 guys that are in that contention. And right. So I think that back half of the first round and the top half of the second round is really like a round in and of itself in my mind in terms of player quality that you're getting, right? The guy that, see it, that the Steelers are going to get at 32 is just as good as the guy someone got at 25 in my mind.
So that does it for Joe and I's competing mock drafts. Dustin, thank you for joining us to give your critique and analysis and some praise for Joe and I's mock draft. We'll be very interested to see, based on your accuracy scores on how you grade mock drafts, who will end up being the top between the three of us. And we're also excited. You're halfway down to Kansas City. What are you most looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to actually meeting the prospects again. So I went to the combine, got to interview a lot of them there, and then get to interview them again tomorrow morning before the draft, and then get to interview them after they get selected. And, I think I'm 40, so like I'm way past ever being able to play a professional sport. So seeing these young men live out their dream in this big moment in life that only happens once, that they get this like awesome moment, and being part of that experience with them is really cool to see. And just kind of like, there's some guys I really love that I fell in love with at the combine just through their press conferences. There's guys I have questions about, but we'll see like if they can sway me press conferences this time around. So we'll see. I'm just excited to be there. And, the excitement at the draft is something unlike anything else because every team is excited. Like, the Super Bowl is great, but only two teams are really interested in the Super Bowl is in terms of fan base. Every fan base is engaged in the draft because the draft can really set you up for the next 10 years or really set you back for 5 if you take the wrong player. Like, if you take the wrong quarterback, you're kind of screwed for 5 years. Even if you take the wrong wide receiver, you're kind of stuck for 3-4 years. So it really has a lasting impact on every team. And that's why I think the draft is such a big event for the NFL, and I'm really excited to go and just be part of it again. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I know you and I feel similarly, Dustin, which is definitely a hot take. But for me, the NFL draft is my favorite event, I guess you could say, in the NFL calendar, even better than the Super Bowl. Because for me, when it comes down to it, these teams, the decisions they make, the strategy they have to go in making those picks, the picks that they make could impact the franchise 5-10 years down in the future, and all teams are affected. So to me, seeing the strategy on display, seeing how they develop these players, it's just very fascinating.
I agree. Best event of the year.
I know Joe disagrees with us pretty strongly.
I don't know. It's just an interesting take. I don't know. I mean, because honestly, like, depending on how big of a fan you are, I mean, the draft isn't always the most exciting thing, and especially when your team doesn't have a first or second round pick and they're not picking until the third round, it really sucks.
Yeah, you'll be excited in 2024 when the Broncos have a top 5 pick because they're horrible again. So you'll be excited.
Dustin. They are not going to be horrible again, man. We got Sean Payton. He's worth that first round pick all day long.
We'll see. We'll see.
You'll see, Dustin. You'll see.
Wow, those are fighting words, Dustin.
Wait,
those are...
hey, you know what? You can circle that game on the calendar. The Broncos are playing the Bills, so
that's right. We'll see what happens. That might be a spicy week at front office pros here.
Absolutely.
It definitely will. You can find us on, as you can see in the bottom left corner, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. We also recently joined Apple and Spotify podcasts, so you can follow us there and listen. We try to do videos, quite a bit. We do several videos on a weekly basis, so you definitely want to check that out. You can also follow us on Twitter at Front Office Pros. You follow myself at Steve_FOP and for Joe at Joe_FOP. And, after you're watching this, we'd love to hear your comments. What are your thoughts on me and Joe's mock draft selections? And, do you have any critiques or praise? Whatever you feel like. Maybe you want to throw tomatoes at us. Just put us down, put in the comments. We'll take any of your comments. But before we close out, Dustin, I'm going to give you the final word. And where can others find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at the D Unit, so THEDUNIT 13 on Twitter, so the D Unit 13. Check me out there because I'll be tweeting a lot this week as I'm at the draft down in Kansas City doing some cool events. That's the best place to find me. You can find my work on Dynasty Pros, Dynasty Nerds, and QBlist.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for watching, everyone, and until next time.